Hello, and thanks for joining us today on how to help your teen get in and get money for college. Welcome, all of you. I see that a number of you have joined, and we have a few others that I'm expecting. So I just want to do a shout out to those who are already here and starting on time. Alicia from Los Angeles has a 10th grader. Wendell from Seattle has a ninth grader. Melissa from Chicago has a 10th grader also. And Sharon in Austin has a 10th grader. I see Sonia from Atlanta with the junior, as well as Sarah from Cleveland with the ninth grader. Natalie is in Phoenix with the 10th grader as well. And there's Bill, who's in Silver Springs, Maryland, with the 10th grader. So thank you all for joining this afternoon. We'll have a few more joining as well, but I want to go ahead and get started. So as we're getting started, I just want to make sure that everyone can see my screen. You should see that it says how to help your teen get in and get money for college. So we will go ahead and get started from here. So I want to welcome you all again. And just so that we're all making sure that we're getting the most out of our time here together and really taking advantage of the time that we have, I want to just ask you if you could please be sure to turn off any distractions that you may have going on in the background. I know that a number of you are probably tuning in from work, and so there are other things that could be occupying your time. I appreciate you joining, but if you could just use this time to really um, get the most out of it as far as your engagement with learning how you can best support your teen's success. So let's just start out. I have a general question for you. I want to know, what do you think are your teens' college prospects? Do you think that they will definitely get into their top choices? Will they probably get into their top choices, or likely not get into their top choices? So if you don't mind just going ahead and inputting your responses into the chat box, and then we will move on. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to post those. By the way, for some of you who may be hearing me for the first time, my voice is usually not this raspy. I am actually just recovering from a cold, and so I'll be taking a couple of quick water breaks as we're talking through this, but I thank you for just bearing with me on some of the coughing. So, okay, I see that a number of you said will probably get in or will likely not get in. No one really said will definitely get in. And so I think that probably you've been hearing a lot of the things in the news about getting in that you say that. And the thing about it is that most of my parents, when I've done this presentation before, many of them do say that their team will probably get in. Some say they will likely not get in. But I don't have as many who say that they will definitely get into their top choice colleges. And the interesting thing is that most teens believe that they definitely will get in, and an even larger percentage believe that they'll probably get in, but it's only a small fraction that say that they're not likely to get in. And I think that a lot of this is driven by just how teens view themselves and view the process. Here is a quote I'd like to share with you that was taken from a Princeton Review report from 2015. So, back last spring, this report was released, and this is where they actually came up with the question that I just shared with you. Their findings were that students don't prioritize learning, but instead focus on the end goal of college acceptance. Now, what's interesting about that is that I would add to that quote that students not only don't prioritize learning, nor do they prioritize the necessary actions for getting into college. So in most instances, students are thinking about getting in and the whole goal around getting into X college, but they're not thinking about what actions need to be taken to get there. Now, if your teen is anything like my teens and some of the ones that I work with, I'd like to know which of these sound like your teen. So maybe your teen is saying, I'm too busy. I'm just too busy. I have a lot going on. I'm doing sports. I'm doing student government. I'm involved in theater and everything else. So I'm just too busy. Or maybe your teen is saying, I got this, meaning that they already know that they're in control. Everything that's needs to be done is going to get done. They say, I got this. So, does that sound like your teen? Okay. Here's the next response, I got time. So, is your teen thinking that even as a junior, I know that several of you have juniors, that they still have time? So, it's the middle of junior year, but they haven't put their college list together yet because they're thinking, I got time to work on this, or I got time to take my SAT or my ACT. Now, the fourth response that your teen may have is mommy or daddy will do it. So they don't have to worry about working on anything right now because they know that their parent will do it for them. So, what do you say to that? Which of these sound like your teen? Is it that they're too busy? I got this. That's what they're saying. They're saying that they have time, or they're saying that you'll do it for them. Which one do you have? So I'll give you a couple of seconds to put in your responses for that. Okay. So some of what I'm seeing is I got this and I'm too busy. Those are two really common ones that I see. No one said that their teen is waiting on them to do it. So that's a good thing. I actually have had some parents say that their teen is waiting on them to do it for them. So, in essence, there's a reality to all of this because teens may be on one end of the spectrum, but the reality is on another end of the spectrum. And so the reality is that college costs are going up. And so there are things that have to be done in a timely way in order to decrease those costs for your family. The second thing is that it's harder to get in. And so that may be something that many of you have been reading about because no one said that their teen would definitely get into their top choice colleges. So, yes, it is harder to get in than it was years ago. And that's especially true for your selective colleges. The other aspect is that the process is a bit more complicated than it used to be. And so not only do you still have the standardized tests to take, essays to write, etc., but there are also some additional tests to be aware of in other parts to the application that we didn't necessarily deal with years ago when we were applying, but it is the case today. So it is a little bit more complicated. And then the final aspect is just that they don't have a lot of time. Time is of the essence. And so I can't stress that enough. And particularly with my sophomores and my juniors who may be waiting on things to happen, and they are right in the college process as we speak. So it's not a lot of time left. Now, one of the things that 64% of teens did say also in that same Princeton Review report is that they can't get help from their parents. Now, if you're like me in terms of my situation when I was applying to college, I couldn't get help from my parents either. I was in one of those situations as the 64% of teens who responded to this question. And my situation was a little bit different because I was a first generation student. And so neither of my parents had gone to college. My mother had finished eighth grade, and my dad had finished 10th grade. And so, what I did when it was time to apply to college, I took out this old typewriter here and I just applied to every college that wrote to me. And I ended up applying to 16 different colleges because I wasn't certain of where I would get in, but I knew I really wanted to go. And I didn't get a lot of help with doing it. I was just applying on my own. And that worked back then. I'm not sure how well that would work today. And so I ended up getting into Stanford University. And the interesting thing about it was that this was 1984. And a lot of people in my hometown really hadn't heard of Stanford at all. So when I was telling them that I was going to Stanford, they were like, "Oh, yeah, where is that? In Connecticut?" And so it's like, no, it's not. But that was that was how well known they were back then. They weren't really known at all. But my mom and I got on this old Greyhound bus, and we rode the bus all the way from Memphis, Tennessee to Palo Alto, California. And let me tell you now, that was a long bus ride. And then when we got there, my mother, as I mentioned to you earlier, hadn't gone to college. So she wasn't certain of how expensive college would be. And so when she left, she gave me $70 to last me through the school year. And I can tell you now, when I went to the bookstore that very next day and my books for one quarter were over $350, wow, that was a real eye opener that I was nowhere prepared for in terms of what it would cost to really be able to thrive in college and to be able to make it those years. But somehow I did. And I ended up graduating from Stanford with $10,000 in debt. And so after graduation and another degree, I went into the corporate world and did all that I could do in terms of earning the money that I needed to pay back those student loans. And one thing about working in the corporate environment, I just did not like it. I didn't feel like it was a fit for me, but I kept on doing it. And then one of the things that happened to me that was life changing, as it may have been for you, because the same has happened to you, is I had a son. And when I had my son in 1996, that's when things really started to shift because with having a child, I realized, wow, I don't want him to be in the same situation I was in terms of schooling because my years of K-12 weren't, the best. And certainly the experience of college wasn't as great either. And if there's a way that I can support his success through the school system, boy, do I want to make a difference for him. And then a couple of years later, I had my second son, and it really got intense because, as you know, if you have more than one child, what works for one doesn't necessarily work for the other. And then I had, 3 years later, I had a third child, a daughter. And so all the things that may have worked for boys certainly don't work for girls. And through it all, I just became obsessed with schooling. I wanted to really have the best schooling experience for them because I hadn't had that good schooling experience that I wanted so desperately through my early years. And so when it comes to trying out or experiencing all of those different school settings that, could work, I've tried them all. I've tried homeschooling. I've done private school. I've done public school. I've done day school, boarding school. I've done countless summer programs, all of those things in support of working with my kids and their success in education. Several years back, though, some families asked me if I would work with them privately. And that's really how my firm got started. And when I'm working with people privately, the expectations are even greater, and I have to work that much harder in terms of giving them those good results that they have hired me to provide for them. And just to share with you those results that I have gained in the years that I have been working with families privately, 95% of my students have been accepted to their top choice colleges. Another result that we track is the amount of scholarship dollars, and our students have received $40,000 to $130,000 in scholarships. And so that's significant dollars when families are applying to colleges. And these scholarship dollars are all monies that come directly from the colleges that are merit based. And so if a family does qualify for need based, that's all extra. Now, in terms of being able to provide these results for families, I created and designed what I call my 5-phase Get In, Get Money program. And this program is to achieve those results consistently. The 5 phases of the program includes the needs assessment phase, list development, application and aid, transition to college, and the network phase. Now, I won't go through all of the phases. Keep in mind that I'm working with students over a longer period of time. And so I work with students starting in ninth grade, in 10th grade, and I'm with them all the way through their freshman year of college. So there's a lot that happens in these phases. Now, what I want to discuss with you today is the list development and the application and aid phase, because both of those phases relate most directly to getting in and getting money for college. Now, I will start into some of the heart of this discussion as far as what it takes to get in and get money for college. Now, here are a few key takeaways for getting in. And again, I'm going to go through several takeaways that I hope that you will be able to make actionable with your teen right away. And in the workbook that you have, there is a place where you can write down and track these ideas and really make them actionable for you. So here's the first one. The first takeaway for getting in is that the teen is in charge of the process. Now, when I say that, parents get a little bit nervous about that. And the reason being is because they know their teen and they're probably thinking, oh my goodness, my teen is in charge. And I'm going to say a resounding yes, your teen is the one that's in charge. So that means that your teen is making the phone calls to the school. Your teen is communicating with that college on an ongoing basis. Your teen is the one that's making the campus visit reservations. Your teen is the one that's doing the college research. So it's all of those things. And in most cases, it's your teen that's going to initiate this. Sometimes they may not know to initiate it. You may have to give them that extra push. But at the end of the day, they're the ones in charge of the process. It's not mom or dad who's calling the school on their behalf and doing everything for them. That's going to hurt their application more than it will help it. Now, here are some practical things that I do in terms of my work with students that helps with the teen being in charge of the process. So I share with them very directly when I first meet them and throughout. I'm coaching and I'm guiding, but you're doing the work. So first thing is they set their own schedule. I don't contact parents to set the schedule for them. I want the teen to set the schedule because it allows them to start to develop those time management skills that they're going to need throughout college. And so I generally will meet with them every 3 to 4 weeks, and they're setting that schedule. So they will say, okay, I have an exam this week, and so I can't meet with you until the following week. That's fine. They need to be the one to determine that. And so it's important for them to set their schedule, and it's a way of giving them ownership in the process to make sure they stay in charge. The second one is that I have the teen RSVP for their campus visits. Now, I know that some moms and dads will set up the campus visits for them. And so, what we do is when we are doing our college research, I am very, direct with the parents as well as the teens to say, no, your teen has to be the one to RSVP for these campus visits. And so, when we are actually in our meetings, the teen will go ahead and go to that campus's website, that college website, go to the page where they can make a reservation. They make the reservation. They look at the next college that they'll be traveling to see if the times will align. And then I have them go to the maps, Google Maps, or some other type of map website where they can map out the drive time between the campuses. And so they're doing this on their own, and that helps them to know the websites and to be better prepared for their visit than if someone else made the reservation for them and they just showed up for it. The third thing is pre-coaching. Now, this is something that I do before a student goes on a mock inter go on a visit to a campus. I make sure I mock interview them before they go to do a college fair. We talk about, how to handle that college fair more strategically so that it's not a waste of their time and they're not so overwhelmed by it as well. And so the pre coaching is a way to help the student with building their own confidence in terms of what they have to do. And I think of it also as helping them to build some resilience as well. And and so I do pre coach as a way to give them the tools and skills that they need and help develop their confidence before they go out to do fairs, before they go out to do any type of interviewing or visits to the campuses. For the campus visit, they get a list of questions to ask beforehand. And so that helps them be more successful. And again, they're taking ownership of the process. So, the next factor in terms of getting in is what I call more than a test score. And basically, what this means is that your teen is looked at in a more holistic way than what their test scores may say about them. And this works either way. So even if your teen is a great test taker or if they're not so good of a test taker, when students have high test scores, I see that they may have those high test scores, but everything else is out of line. And so it's really important to have some balance in terms of how you look at the teens' prospects for college and making sure that those test scores aren't the only thing that's the focus of getting them in. The other piece I should say about it is when students aren't such good test takers, there are other options for them. And it doesn't have to be that because they have a low score, then they're not qualified to get in or qualified to even apply to certain colleges. I do want to just disabuse you of one notion right away because I hear this so often. Teens do not have to take the ACT and the SAT. A lot of time and money is wasted when they try to take both tests. What I recommend to all of my students is focusing on one test. Which test is your strongest? That's the one you should concentrate on, because those tests are different, and the way the dates are set, you just really don't have time to get in a lot of studying, plus have time to do a retake, etc. So focus on the test that's best for you. All of the colleges will take either or, so you don't have to take both tests. Just take the one that's best for you. Now, some practical tips I will add in terms of looking beyond the test scores is that there's a website called fairtest.org. And at that website, there are close to 900 colleges that don't require any type of testing. And so that's a lot of colleges to choose from if your teen does not score well in terms of testing. The second option is there is a book called Colleges That Change Lives. It's a wonderful book with about 40 colleges in it. And those colleges focus on other things aside from what your test score is. They're looking for students who will bring a different, perspective, and a different value to their community. They're smaller colleges that are primarily liberal arts colleges, and students have a lot of opportunities to build relationships with their classmates as well as with professors. So the emphasis of those colleges is really different. The third thing, and this is something that may be a little bit harder for you to do, is I would suggest scouting other programs. And what I mean by that is, let me back up for a minute. Let's say that your teen is into the arts, and you know that one of the high schools that's really strong in the arts is Walnut Hill outside of the Boston area. So you could go and look at that high school's website, see where their students are going into college. That might help with developing a list of colleges that could be a good fit for your teen who's into the arts, and learn more about those colleges that are accepting students who have expertise and talent in the arts. So that's something that I do on an ongoing basis, but because again, this is what I do professionally. So I am visiting high schools throughout the year as well to get a sense for how they're supporting their students' success and understanding that, so that I can support my students privately around getting into those colleges that they may not even have considered prior, but could be a good fit for them and also provide good opportunities for them as well. Now, one last thing, please excuse me. One thing I will say as far as getting in, one last point is what I call find the hook and not the ball. Now, here's what I mean by that. In the past, we thought about getting into college meant having a student who was well rounded. And I can tell you right now, over the last several years, the trend hasn't been to accept students who are well rounded. The trend has been to accept those students who have some kind of angle or some kind of hook. And so well rounded doesn't really isn't really as competitive, let me put it that way, as it used to be many years ago. And I'll give you a case in point. I'll share with you my student Matthew. So Matthew, really great kid. He he was. I started working with him in his sophomore year, and again, he was involved in a lot of things at school, very well liked. He was a great athlete. He participated in lacrosse, in golf, very good student, well liked by his teachers. He was also involved in student government. He had community service activities that he was involved in. And there were just a lot of wonderful things to say about Matthew. I had worked with his older brother as well, but Matthew brought some different talents as far as what he would present to a college. And it's interesting because he and his brother had totally different college lists because even though they look alike, their personalities are different. A lot of things are different about them. And so with Matthew's application, instead of focusing on all of those wonderful things about him, we actually just looked at what could be something that would stand out about Matthew. And so for his applications, his hook was chemistry. That's something that he was very interested in. He enjoyed chemistry. And so that was his hook. That was the angle that he took in his applications for admission success. It worked very well. And I'll share with you in the next section of this webinar how well it worked for Matthew and how he was able to leverage that hook. So those are the three factors as far as getting in. One that I talked about was just making sure that your team is in charge of the process. The second one was making sure that the emphasis isn't only on the test score, because there's more to it than just the test score as far as getting in. And then thirdly, I talked about finding the hook. And so really being a bit more angular and not trying to, have your student present themselves only as well-rounded. Well-rounded is just not as competitive for admissions purposes. So let's talk about some key takeaways for getting money for college. So the first takeaway, and this again may sound really commonsensical and you're thinking, why does this matter? But apply early. Apply early. I can't say it enough. Apply early from an admissions perspective. Apply early from a scholarship perspective. From a scholarship perspective, and this is scholarships that come from external sources, monies that will apply to any college. Your teen can start applying for scholarships as early as age 13. So they don't have to wait until senior year to start applying for outside scholarships. Many of these scholarships have a minimum age of 13, and so they can start applying then. Now, on the admission side, I will say that your teen can look at the option of applying early action or applying for priority deadlines. For some schools, particularly for some of your larger public institutions, if you apply by the early or priority deadline, you qualify for scholarships. If you wait to a regular or later deadline, you won't be eligible for any scholarship money. So it's really important to apply early. It does mean you need to have your act together a little bit more so, but it can make a huge difference in terms of the money you get. So apply early. It's really important in terms of getting money. The second place in terms of getting money is in your list. Now, I will talk again about Matthew on this one. He was my case study example that I talked about earlier. So, Matthew, in his list of colleges, there were colleges on his list that were strong in chemistry, as well as those that were doing research in chemistry or smaller departments in chemistry. So, as he was putting his list together, he was looking at those colleges in terms of where he could apply that chemistry passion that he had. And so, in his list, it really made a difference in terms of the money that he got. He received significant scholarship dollars from colleges, and it was in the colleges that he applied to, the list. They were colleges that were seeking students like him. And the way he alerted those colleges about his interests was through his essays. And so I can't say enough about this, and I get the question a lot from parents about writing and how well their student needs to write in order to get into college, and the writing is important. So for Matthew and his applications, he just wrote about chemistry. I mean, he had a list. One of the colleges asked the question, what's your top 10 list? And that's it. That was the question. And his top 10 list was just chemical formulas. It was a list of chemical formulas, and that was brilliant. And in other responses, he talked about chemistry, some of the things he had done in class. And so that was the way he let them know. Now, Matthew, I'll tell you, before his family had even applied for any need based aid, so he got money directly from the college. He got $100,000 just from the college itself, and then an additional 25,000 from the chemistry department. So it really worked in terms of the list that he had, as well as the essays that he wrote. The fourth factor I'll mention in terms of getting money for college is called mixing it up. And what I mean by that is when you go to the college's website, they will have what I refer to as sticker prices. Those prices that they have online, they are also discounted. And that's why I refer to them affectionately as sticker prices. So when you go to the public colleges websites, those numbers are going to be fairly close. There won't be as much discounting. And so if the website says 20,000, it'll probably be 20,000, or maybe it'll be 19. When you go to the private college's website, they may say 50 or 60, but take a look at what percentage of students receive financial aid. Also, take a look at what the average cost is, because once you look at that, you'll see that it's a lot less expensive to go than it may appear when you look only at the bottom line number. So I really encourage students to have a mix of publics and privates on their list. I do have some families who will come to work with me privately who only want to apply to public colleges. And each year, I encourage them to at least include 2 or 3 private universities because that will give them a lot more negotiating leverage. And every time the privates will offer much more than what the publics will offer. I had a student a few years ago who lived in Texas and she applied to UT Austin. Now, she applied to UT Austin in addition to applying to several other private universities out of state. Now, UT Austin offered her $600. What can you do with $600? I mean, yeah, it's something, but that's not going to go a long way. So it was a lot less expensive for her to go to a private college out of state than to go to UT Austin, which was in her own backyard, because they just didn't offer the funding support. So those are the key factors, applying early, making sure that you apply to a mix of colleges that will match up with whatever your hook is, writing strong essays, and applying to a balance of public and private colleges. Now, 64% of those teens say that they can't get help from parents. So I'm asking you, how confident do you feel in terms of helping your teen? Do you feel like, yes, you can definitely help them, you can probably help them, or not help them? So if you could just type into the chat box your response in terms of being able to help your teen. I'm sorry. Okay. So one of you said definitely, a few said probably, and a few said not. Okay. So not as confident. Well, the thing about it, here's the big stat that you should be aware of. How many hours would you say you think it takes for parents to help their teen through the college admissions process? What would you say? Okay. I have someone who said 140 hours. I have one that says 200. Well, the response is that it takes 300 plus hours for parents to help their teen through the college admissions process. That's a lot more than most parents even realize. But let me tell you, that's spot on. That 300 plus hours is spot on. Now, here's where some parents get stuck in terms of why it may be more on the plus side. So, one is having reliable information. So, you may have access to some really good websites that have reliable information. If not, then it's going to take you a little bit of time in terms of really being able to effectively help your teen. There are tons of websites out there, but not all of them have good, reliable information. The next thing is resources and tools. This may take a little bit of effort. So, by resources and tools, what I mean by that is things like having an activities resume template, a way for your team to know how to put together their activities resume. How about questions for your campus visits? For several of you who are on this webinar who have juniors, you have campus visits that are likely coming up during spring break in the next month or so. Do you have questions prepared that your team will ask, or questions that your family will ask while you're on the campus visits? A database, that's really important. That's another resource and tool that would be needed for this process. And so parents may not have access to a good searchable database, or even the teens have access to a good searchable database. And then the third area where I see parents really getting stuck is on the time. I mean, like I showed you earlier, it takes 300 plus hours, to help your teen with the college admissions process. Where do you find time to do all of that? And again, it could really be more on the plus side if you're wasting a lot of time. So here's what I'd like to offer to you in terms of an opportunity. We have designed the College 101 Get In, Get Money online workshop. We just finished up our last workshop here in January, and it was great. It was highly successful, an interactive online workshop for parents, just for parents. Parents in this last session in January had sophomores as well as juniors. And there are 5 course session dates for the workshop. Our next workshop will be offered on March 1st, and we'll be meeting 5 Tuesdays in March. March 1st, 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th. And those sessions will be 75 to 90 minutes each week. Now, I will warn you, there will be some homework in between. Hopefully, it won't take you too long, but there will be some homework and opportunities for you to engage your team in the process as well. So, let me tell you a little bit about what will be covered each week in each module. So the first module will be the planning stage. And this is where we'll talk about, what the post-secondary options are for your team, what's available to them, what are some of the college trends that they should know about, and how do you really get a sense for where your team fits within all of this. The second module, module 2, we'll talk about laying the foundation. And so here are the assessments and inventories that your team can take so that they can figure out a little bit more about perhaps what they want to do, what their career interests are. Here is where we'll talk a little bit more about their activities resume, their transcript, those things that they have control over. So this is around laying the foundation. In the third week, we're going to talk about selecting the right college. Whoa, this is a big topic. This is the one where in the last session we did talk for about a good 90 minutes because in selecting the right college, you will have access to my firm's exclusive private database to start to do some of that searching. And we do get into, how do you know what college is a good fit for your team? And so it's a really, really strong module because we get into some details that you may not have even thought about before in terms of what's going to matter for your team's success. But this is around selecting that right college and knowing how to really search those tools that'll make a difference for you. In the fourth week, we'll talk about applying from the admission officer's seat. Now, this is really eye opening because in this fourth module, we talk about really understanding the admissions process from those forms that your team doesn't have any control over, those aspects of the application process that they, in most cases, will never see. And so you really get an insider perspective around how your team is being viewed in the admissions process. Now, in workshop 5, this is the culminating module where we talk about unpacking your financial profile and affordability. Now, this workshop, as I referred to it as the culminating, because all of those other things that we're discussing in modules 1 through 4 build up to understanding this financial profile and what affordability is all about. Now, the in-depth thing that we do in this final workshop, which you probably won't get anywhere else, is we actually talk about how need is determined. And that's one thing that most high schools do not offer. I don't know of any high schools that offer, and I know, what a lot of high schools around the US are doing. I mean, at the high school level, they're sharing with you the FAFSA form, and some may talk about the CSS profile, but they don't get into the kind of depth that we'll unpack in this final session where we're talking about how need is determined, how it's determined at the federal level, and how it's then determined at the institutional level. That's the kind of thing you want to know about in terms of determining what your family's financial profile is. Now, for all of you who will sign up for our online course, By February 20, that's 5 days from now, there are a couple of really exciting bonuses that we have just for you. Now, the first bonus is that prior to our session starting on March 1st, you will get a 45-minute coaching session. And what this coaching session is it's a time for me and the parents to talk about how to get the most out of the class that's coming up and how you can make the difference in terms of supporting your team's success. And this is a really awesome coaching session because it's one where it's just focused on your family and what your team's needs are. And so we dive right in right away with talking about that. And certainly for my parents' last session who had juniors, oh, we were right on top of it with that first bonus session of 45 minutes. Now, the second bonus that you'll get if you register by February 20th, is a summer program list. Now, how many of you already have your summer planned out? Okay. And I just know that for my parents who were in the January session, that summer program list had a couple of programs on there that they had not heard about, programs that their team could still apply to and have something meaningful to do this coming summer. So, whether you have a ninth grader, a 10th grader, or a junior, the summers are important for really making a difference in terms of whether they have time to explore, figure out some things they want to do, perhaps make up for a class they didn't have during the school year, or even for my juniors, it's a time to get noticed by the college. So the summer experience can really be invaluable. And those are the two exciting bonuses that we have if you sign up by February 20th. Now, here's what the course will entail. We'll start on March 1st. It will be 5 weeks, and the sessions are 75 to 90 minutes each. Now, we will more than likely meet in the evening time. Last time we did have folks who were taking the course that were across time zones. And so we ended up meeting at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. And so I am proposing that that's when we'll meet starting in March as well. Now, the key things that you'll get out of this is you'll discover how your team measures up among their peers. And I know that your teen is the greatest because a lot of parents think their teen is the greatest. And that's all right. I understand that. But there's also thousands of other teens who are also the greatest. And so you get a sense for just kind of how your teen stacks up. And that's okay. That's good to know now. The second thing is understanding what it takes for your team to get in. And so this will not just be about students in general who are in the class of 2018 or the class of 2017 or 2019. This is about your team. What does it mean for them to get into college? And so we will do, a couple of assessments where your team will be involved during the time that you're in the course, and we can start to really get a handle on that. And then the other thing that you will gain from this course is that you'll be able to develop your financial profile and determine what's affordable for your family. And that's important too. So the value of this wonderful program is $2,400. And I know you're thinking $2,400. Yes, it is. And the investment, though, to be involved is a bit less than that. And so the investment for this program is $297 for the workshop only. And for the VIP course edition, it's $497. Now, a question I often get is what's the difference between the workshop only and the VIP course edition? So, the workshop only is the 5 week sessions that you have. And again, if you sign up by February 20th, you'll receive the two bonuses. as well. For the VIP course edition, which is $497, you will also get 3 additional private coaching sessions. And again, those coaching sessions will be done during the 5-week period. And it's a time for me to meet with you one on one and really discuss more specifically what your action steps are for getting your team through the process, and talking more specifically too about where you may be getting stuck. I mean, I talked about that this evening in terms of where parents get stuck, but we'll also talk about it more specifically as it relates to your teen when we're going through the process. And particularly if you have a teen that's a junior right now and they haven't gotten into the process or really engaged with this in a way that you want to, then we start troubleshooting about that and what can be done to get them to start to move the needle a bit and go beyond where they are to make sure that they're getting in and getting the money. So that's our program, and we are really excited for you to consider this opportunity that we have for parents to really learn more about how to support their teen's success. Now, I know that there are a few questions. I am going to stop the recording and take those questions offline. And I want to thank you again if you're listening to the recording of this. Uh, Thanks a lot for joining and listening in. And I look forward to hearing from you and look forward to you joining us in March for our next session of College 101 Get In, Get Money online workshop. So I'm going to stop the recording and then I'll take questions.